Good morning, Ambassador, students, and colleagues. My name is An Do-kyung. I am the director of the Institute of Social Sciences at Seoul National University. Thank you, everyone, for coming to today's special seminar. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine began on the 24th of February this year, we are witnessing the destruction of cities and villages, killings of innocent civilians, and death of children. But we are also witnessing the heroic fights of Ukrainian soldiers and brave resistance of the citizens. A global public opinion survey conducted in April across 27 countries around the world reports that 80% of Koreans agree that Korea must support sovereign countries when attacked by other countries. 78% of Koreans approve of imposing sanctions on Russia and are willing to pay higher prices for gas and oil if necessary. In sum, a vast majority of Koreans support Ukraine and condemn Russia in this war. Why? Because if we support democracy, we must oppose attacks on democracy. If we believe in sovereign rights of nations, we must condemn unprovoked invasion into neighboring countries. The Institute of Social Sciences and the Department of Political Science and International Relations and the Program on European Studies have organized academic seminars on this war and are planning on doing more in the future. But at the same time, we thought it necessary to have someone who can represent Ukraine on the campus of this university and speak with us. So we are glad and thankful that Ambassador Ponomarenko accepted our invitation. In the next hour or so, the ambassador will be speaking with us and the audience will have time to express their opinions and ask questions. Now, please join me in welcoming His Excellency Ambassador Dmytro Ponomarenko.
Good morning. Dear Professor Jun-hee Park, dear Professor Won-tai Kang, Professor T.K. An, dear students, colleagues. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dmytro Ponomarenko, and I'm the ambassador of Ukraine in Korea. And thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today and speak to you directly. It's really my honor and pleasure to be here in one of the leading Korean universities, possibly the one of the leading university in the world. So, as you know, my country is currently going through the difficult time, and I'm sure you see a lot of reports about it on the world news and read about it in the papers. There is a war going on, a brutal and unjustifiable aggression started by the Russian against my country, Ukraine. But before I present to you my views on this subject, I would like to present my country to you first. I will give you the bare facts about Ukraine. Ukraine is the large European nation. Our territory is roughly the size of France. There are about 42 million people living in Ukraine. Of those, 78% are Ukrainians, 17% are Russians. The rest are other minorities, Poles, Hungarians, Romanians, Greeks, etc. Almost 100 nationalities. We have Koreans too, almost different figures, but from 20,000 to 30,000 Koreans living with us in Ukraine. We also have our land among the most fertile in the world, which makes us one of the top grain world producers. That's why the UN food agencies talk about the potential food crisis as a consequence of this war in Ukraine. We also have developed heavy industries, just like Korea. We produce a lot of steel. We are good at aircraft building. We produce engines that are used even here in Korea in the military and police helicopters. You might have heard of the Ukrainian aircraft Mriya AN-225, the biggest and heaviest in the world, with a takeoff weight of 440 tons. It has been destroyed now, along with the many plants and factories by Russian shelling. And most importantly, we have our people, Ukrainians, people who love their land, loving working on it, courageous and stubborn, protective of their own, people that value their freedom above all. It was that sense of freedom in nationhood that Ukraine has tried to crush over centuries. Despite the fact that we have lived on our land for 1,000 years, despite the fact that we have our state and medieval time in the Kiev Rus, when Moscow did not even exist, despite our own language and culture, Russia would declare that Ukrainian nation is non-existent and claim our history for its own. I think you are a bit familiar with this concept when a neighboring country says that your national costume or your national dish is actually their heritage. We have the same thing, only our neighbors pretend that our whole nation belongs to them. To support that claim, in 300 years, that part of Ukraine belonged to Russian Empire. The Russian state tried to suppress the Ukrainian nationality. The language was banned in 19th century. In 20th century, Ukrainians were starved to death by artificial famine created by the Bolsheviks. There up to 10 million people perished. The whole villages were deported from Ukraine to faraway Siberia. The culture was suppressed. Still, we survived. The fact is that Ukraine as a crown jewel has always been crucial to the Russian imperialistic idea. The rich land, the hardworking, talented people, good geographical position in the center of Europe. It was with joining Ukrainian lands to the Russian state that was called Muscovy in the 18th century that the empire started by Peter I. Without Ukraine, there can be no rebirth of Great Russia, which is all President Putin dreams of. Keep this in mind when you think about the roots of the present conflict. Now let's return to the present. The important things you might understand it that this war did not actually start on the 24th of February 2022. It began 8 years ago, in February 2014. Back then, the people of Ukraine had just managed to topple the corrupt pro-Russian regime that tried to depart from the popular pro-European course of integration and bring Ukraine into the Russian fold. You might have heard the name Euromaidan or just Maidan, which is actually the Ukrainian word for square. The protests were centered around the main square in Kiev, capital of Ukraine, the Square of Independence, hence the name of the uprising. In 2013, Ukraine was presented with two mutually exclusive choices of model. Understanding the failure of its effort to take over Ukraine, Russia resorted to the open military aggression. Troops were sent to Crimea, where Russia has the naval base. At the same time, Russian subversion groups appear in Donbass, standing people protests and overtaking the local administrative buildings. The armed conflicts erupted, resulting in annexation of Crimea and occupation of parts of Donbass region. Russian aggression caused Ukraine massive human and financial economic losses. In the years of war in Donbass, from the April 2014 to January 2021, according to the UN, more than 13,000 people were killed. 33,500 wounded, approximately 1.5 million of Donbass and Crimea residents were forced to relocate. Since I arrived in Korea, I sometimes come across the expert analysis, so-called expert analysis, that the conflict in 2014 started because the separatists allegedly felt threatened by rise of nationalism in Ukraine. Apart from repeating the Russian propagandist cliches, it shows total lack of knowledge of the Ukrainian realities. At no point during the Maidan uprising there were claims to the supremacy of one nation over any others. People fought for the freedom of their choice, for the freedom of their country against corruption and Russian dictate. Are those the values of the extreme nationalism? I don't think so. I would say it's mere representing the ultra-right political spectrum, the Liberty Party, did not even make it through the electoral areas, 5%. And the subsequent parliamentary election, which was held in October 2000. At the same time, a pro-Russian party did make it into parliament. So what was the threat? Another myth disseminated by Moscow and repeated by those who base their research on Russian resources only, is that there is a confrontation between the Ukrainian speakers and Russian speakers. In Ukraine, allegedly, there is a divide in the Western and Eastern Ukraine with pro-Western and pro-Russian sympathizers respectively. Not true. I repeat, not true. This is not true. Yes, the people of Ukraine use both Ukrainian and Russian languages. Yes, the Ukrainian language is predominant in Western, Central and Northern parts of Ukraine, and Russian is more used in Eastern and Southern part of Ukraine. But all those people are Ukrainians. They love their country. They are fighting for it now, both Ukrainian speakers and Russian speakers. Besides, the language situation is already changing. The latest survey shows 83% of Ukrainians in favor of the Ukrainian as the only official language in Ukraine. They do not want to be a part of Russia. So as the case of Ireland teaches us, do not be fooled by the language. Do not be fooled by the language. The same goes for the people's sympathies. The percentage of people in favor of European integration in 2021 in Ukraine was 68% on average. Even now, in the midst of war, 78% of Ukrainians believe Ukraine is moving in the right direction. Another thing that I hear sometimes from the so-called experts is that Ukraine somehow provoked Russia to invade by pursuing the NATO course. I would like to remind them that Ukraine was a perfectly neutral state when Russia attacked us in 2014. In 1991, when it gained independence, Ukraine possessed the third nuclear arsenal in the world. It had tactical and strategic ballistic missiles, as well as heavy bombers capable of carrying nuclear weapons for the very far distance. Of all, it was destroyed in 1994 when Ukraine gave up its status of nuclear power, in exchange of which US, UK, and Russia and others guaranteed our sovereignty and territorial integrity under the Budapest Memorandum. Regrettably, it speaks of the naivety of the Ukrainian leadership, that due to the character of the document, those guarantees were not legally binding to the parties. It didn't ensure our immunity from the armed aggression by Russia. So let me ask you, what would you do in the same situation? The much larger neighboring state with huge military arsenal and nuclear weapons invades part of your country and demonstrates all intent to go further. Its media start hatred campaign against you, disseminated blatant lies. Its politicians urge the army to drop bombs on you. What would you do? Would you try to stay neutral and appease your neighbor, comply with its absurd demands, allow it to dictate you its rules? Or do you seek security and protection in alliance with other stronger states? I believe that any nation has an inherent sovereign right to choose its own security arrangements, including treaties of alliance, which cannot be taken from it by anyone. We do not recognize a right of any country to impose its vision of those of interest on others under the threat of force. Our desire to join NATO was perfectly understandable. The government of Ukraine was acting upon the aspiration of people of Ukraine to ensure security of the state. It was exactly because of Russian aggression against Ukraine in 2014 that the idea of joining NATO gained overwhelming support among Ukrainians, 62% at that time. The reasoning that Ukraine somehow made Russia invade, it's completely false. And it's similar to saying that victim provoked a criminal to attack it. Also, all the talk of the zones of privileged interests does not remind you of the early 20th century when the colonial powers occupied others under the pretext of special interests, of the mission to bring peace and prosperity to all countries. Do you really think that 20th century politics would work in the 21st century? I don't think so. Not with my country anyway. I will be honest and tell you that what I think. I think that Putin has realized that politically he already lost Ukraine for good. The only way to keep Ukraine in the fold was an open military invasion, because free, democratic, and prosperous Ukraine at his border was an existential threat to his plutocratic totalitarian regime. What Putin really intends in conducting this war is not ensuring the security of Russian state. It's not the protection of Russian minority in Ukraine at all. Look at the acts of terror and genocide his troops are committing in Ukraine as we speak. All the facade of caring about Russian-speaking Ukrainians of brotherly nations has dropped away. The Russians are rising to the ground, the very cities with the Russian-speaking minorities. They are trying to create their own administration wherever they can in the territories they manage to occupy. They are planning false referendums, just like the one in Crimea, to justify future annexations. The real aim is destroying the Ukrainian state, removing the Ukrainian statehood once and for all, incorporating our lands into Russia, and restoring the Russian Empire, the so-called Soviet Union, new Soviet Union. At the Wall Street Journal observed last week, Ukraine, quoting, Ukraine is the heart of the matter. With Ukraine under its thumb, Moscow sees itself as the greatest power in Europe. Without Ukraine, the dream that Russia can recapture the Soviet Union status as a superpower will die a bitter death. Putin wants to carve his place in history, as most dictators do. I'm sure at times such these, many people of the free democratic countries ask themselves, what can be done to stop such brutal, mindless aggression? How can a full-scale invasion under delusional pretext be allowed to happen in the 21st century? The answers are not easy. I know that after the war is over, there will be time for analysis of what went wrong and how one dictatorship was allowed to turn into something that came dangerously close to a Nazi regime. Right now, the only answer my country has is we fight to defend ourselves. We decided to fight. We stand united against any attempt to destroy us, to break the existing world order, to impose on the world the rule of might is right. We make sure there is a retribution, that for every act of terror committed by the Russian troops, there will be an international tribunal. As Korea did decades ago, we need our allies and partners to stand with us. The whole democratic world is now united in their support of our struggle against this unjust war. Because more than the future of Ukraine is being decided. What happens in Ukraine is not just about Ukraine, not just about our country. It's about, at least about Europe and the world order at all. If we allow Putin to reach his goal, the other countries will burn. Any other dictator will be able to impose his will on others by threats of sending missiles or making nuclear strikes. This must be stopped now. We know that the Koreans are well aware of what it means to fight for the independence of one beloved country. We are truly grateful to the Korean public that reacted with such warmth and support to the tragedy my country is going through. To everyone who stands with Ukraine, we are truly grateful to the Korean public that reacted with such warmth and support, I told you already. You present the future of this country and the world, I'm sure. We have here today the future CEOs, politicians, ministers, maybe even presidents. So you will have to make your own important decision. I hope you will remember the lessons of this war. Democracy is worth fighting for. Freedom is worth fighting for. Your choice is worth fighting for. The principles are no less important than the economic interests. Above all, your spirit is what matters the most. I wish you every success in your studies. And when the war is over and victory will be ours, come and visit our beautiful country, Ukraine. Thank you very much. Kamsahamnida.
Thank you, Ambassador, for the inspiring speech. And I apologize that I said that the war began on the 24th of February. Now, we'll take questions or the expression of opinions from the audience and students or professors, and whoever, anyone wants to say something or ask questions. 질문이나 또 의견은 영어 또는 한국말로 하셔도 됩니다. 네, 한국말로 하시면은 저나 다른 사람이 통역해 드리도록 하겠습니다. So before you ask questions, very briefly introduce yourself, name and department.
Thank you, Ambassador. My name is Yoon-ki Lee, and I'm an undergraduate student at Yonsei University, Underwood International College. And first of all, I would like to express my sincere condolences to the people of Ukraine in these extremely difficult times. So from my understanding, Ukraine is pursuing cases against Russia in the International Court of Justice and other international tribunals, but constraints on jurisdiction and enforcement seems to be limiting the case's practical impact. So do you think that there needs to be the creation of a new international tribunal with broader jurisdiction to address Russia's actions more effectively? Thank you.
Thank you very much. For better, we decided to make like, I will answer Ukrainian, and we have the translator who will translate in Korean, because I know that we have not only people presenting here, we have the online streaming, and it will be maybe easier and understandable for the other who joining us online. So as to the International Tribunal, I think this situation, Ира, вы, может быть, возьмите микрофон? Can we have mic for the translator? Mike. Все, що зроблено за ці трошки більше 2 місяців російськими військами в Україні, це дійсно потребує дуже ретельного розгляду Міжнародним кримінальним судом і надання оцінки з точки зору можливості засудження головних виновників цього всього, цих всіх жахів, які були зроблені під час війни в Україні.
우크라이나 전쟁이 발발한 지 2달이 지났습니다. 우크라이나에서 러시아군이 저지른 만행에 관련해서 저희가 이제 조사를 통해서 꼭 평가를 받아야 되고 국제법원에 서야 된다고 생각합니다. 러시아군이 저지른 행동은 규탄하기 위해서 꼭 법원에서 절차를 거쳐야 된다고 생각합니다.
Окрім вбивств і знущань, які були здійснені і зафіксовані російськими військами на окупованих, а потім звільнених територіях, ми зараз бачимо примусове вивезення українських людей на територію Росії, що також підпадає під дії Міжнародного кримінального суду, законодавства.
여러분들도 아시다시피 러시아군이 지금 우크라이나에서 사살 많이 내고 있고 살인 사건이나 강간 그런 이제 만행에 대한 증거들이 분명하게 있습니다. 그리고 러시아군들이 불법적으로 우크라이나 사람을 러시아에 데려가서 불법적으로 그런 행위에 대해서 국제법원에서 꼭 조사가 필요하고 추후에 저희 우크라이나에서 꼭 정당하게 대응해야 된다고 생각합니다.
Місяць тому я зустрічався з колишнім секретарем Організації Об'єднаних Націй пан Гі Муном, і він мені показав звернення організації, яка називається The Elders, яка членами цієї організації є безпосередньо колишні президенти та прем'єр-міністри провідних світових держав, яка закликала до притягнення до кримінальної відповідальності безпосередньо президента Росії Путіна.
한 달 전에 제가 전에 반기문 UN 사무총장 만나 뵐 기회가 있었습니다. 그분 말씀하시기를 The Elders라는 이제 단체에서 청원을 냈는데 푸틴을 규탄하고 푸틴이 저지른 만행에 대해서 꼭 조사가 필요하다고 그렇게 호소를 했습니다.
Я впевнений, що всі злочини, скоєні російськими військами, і всі організатори цих злочинів будуть покарані. Всі ці злочини фіксуються міжнародними організаціями по захисту прав людей, нашою кримінальною прокуратурою. Всі будуть закликані до відповідальності.
지금 러시아 분들이 이제 어쨌든 저지르고 있는 만행에 대해서 우크라이나뿐만 아니고 온 세계가 보고 있는데 저희뿐만 아니라 그 법원에서도 조사를 꼭 할 거고 인권 침해 관련해서 기타 등등 그런 저지른 행위에 대해서 꼭 조사가 이루어질 거라고 믿습니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 저는 연세대학교에서 국제통상을 전공하고 있는 학생 김기환입니다. 저는 조금 더 실질적인 측면에서 대사님께 질문을 드리고 싶은데요. 이제 저희가 대한민국의 한 명의 시민으로서 그리고 대학생으로서 어떠한 행동을 취하고 어떠한 입장을 취해야 미래에 이제 전쟁이 끝난 사회에서 우크라이나 국민들 앞에서 좀 부끄럽지 않고 그래도 우리의 할 몫을 했다고 인정을 받을 수 있을지에 대해서 조금 더 실질적인 측면에서 네, 질문을 드리고 싶습니다. Доброго дня, пане посли. Я студент Йонсей університету факультету міжнародної комерції. Хочу спитати більш з практичного боку щодо проблем України. Ми, як студент та громадянин Кореї, я хочу спитати, що ми можемо зробити з практичного боку для України, щоб не соромитися потім в світі, коли не буде війни вже, щоб нам не було соромно перед українцями та перед світом, та перш за все перед собою. Так, дякую.
Ну, по-перше, я дуже вражений українською мовою, яку я почув з аудиторії. Я дуже вдячний вам за це.
네, 먼저 우크라이나어로 질문해 주셔서 너무 감격스럽고 네, 질문을 해 주셔서 감사드립니다.
Я навіть скажу, що ви розмовляєте як щирий українець, кажучи, що.
네, 정말 우크라이나인이 그 발음 정말 우크라이나인이 순수 발음대로 말씀하셨어요. 쇼라는 발음이.
Я за 2 місяці, які я тут, трошки більше, я відчув, головне, що я відчув, це в порівнянні, я був в багатьох країнах, я працював багато років в Китаї, але те, як звичайні люди, діти, дорослі люди, з якою теплотою в серці вони відносяться не тільки до нас, а взагалі. Це те, що відрізняє корейців від інших. Це теплота в серці і людяність.
제가 한국에 온 지 두 달밖에 안 됐습니다. 하지만 그동안 이제 짧은 기간이었지만 정말 한국인들이 우크라이나에 대한 그런 이제 마음에서 우러나는 그런 따뜻함 느낄 수 있었고요. 그거는 한국하고 아마 다른 나라 민족하고 좀 다른 점이라고 생각합니다.
Ви питаєте, що ви маєте зробити? Я скажу, що перш за все, це те, що і роблю я. Працювати на інформаційному напрямку, оскільки сьогодні вік, коли інформація, навіть не збройна агресія, а інформація вирішує в основному, чи буде виграна ця війна, чи ні.
네, 이제 실질적으로 어떤 도움을 줄 수 있는지 질문하셨는데요. 제 대답은 저도 이렇게 일하지만 정말 저희가 요즘 인터넷 그리고 정보 정말 신속하게 그런 사회에서 살고 있는데 정말 정보가 너무 중요하고요. 바른 정보를 전달하시면은 여러분들이 이러면서 도와주시면 저희가 이 전쟁을 이길 수 있을 것 같습니다.
Саме правда, яка доноситься до людей, вона формує суспільну думку людей. І люди потім з розумінням і цією правдою, вони вже керують своїми урядами і формують вже політику самої країни.
바른 정보 전달하기 그리고 국민들이 이제 그런 정보를 받아줘서 정책으로 변화가고 그런 면에서 아주 중요한 역할을 해주실 수 있을 것입니다.
Я завжди кажу, що як можна не розуміти простий факт, що існує країна. От кожен може уявити себе, свою країну на цьому місці. Ви живете, у вас народжуються діти, ви плануєте їх життя, як вони підуть в школу, як вони потім вступлять в вищий навчальний заклад, як ви будете, де ви будете відпочивати, який будинок ви побудуєте. Ви не плануєте вбивств, ви не плануєте загарбувань, ви не плануєте принижувати якусь іншу націю, і на вас нападають з поясненнями, можливо, логічними.
네, 여러분들이 지금 쉽게 생각하면 저희 입장에서 생각해 보세요. 여러분들이 이제 평상시 생활하고 계시고 뭐 학교나 다니고 직장 다니거나 아이들 좀 키우고 있고 그 아이들의 뭐 입학이나 아니면 직장 다니는데 평범한 행복한 생활을 하고 계시는데 어느 날 갑작스럽게 다른 나라에서 침공을 당했다고 생각해 보세요.
Чому ви маєте виправдовуватись? Тому що на вас напали. Ви маєте пояснювати, що не ви спровокували це, не ваші якісь дії, а агресія країни, яка чомусь хоче бути домінантною в цьому географічному просторі.
그리고 침공한 나라가 어떤 목적으로 저희 나라 왔을까요? 어쨌든 그 도발로 인해서 이루어졌는지 정말 그 침공이 정말 무섭다고 생각합니다.
Тому говоріть правду, ви знаєте про країну, намагайтеся, щоб більшість ваших друзів і знайомих поцікавилось, зрозуміло, почитало українську історію, подивилась українську традицію, побачила, які українці миролюбиві, вільні і працьовиті люди.
우크라이나와 관련된 분이시면 우크라이나를 잘 아실 텐데 주변에도 우크라이나를 많이 알리십시오. 우크라이나 책도 많이 읽으시고 우크라이나 문화 역사 배우시고 우크라이나인들이 정말 평화를 사랑하는 민족이고요. 자유를 사랑하는 민족입니다.
Ми ніколи ні на кого не нападали, жодного разу. Весь час, протягом всієї нашої історії ми захищались. Захищались з усіх боків. З півдня, з півночі, з заходу. Але ми ніколи не планували агресії.
네, 저희는 역사상 우크라이나 역사 아시면은 저희가 항상 공격 안 하고 침공만 당했던 나라거든요. 남부 쪽에서 뭐 북쪽에서 항상 저희 나라에 이제 와서 전쟁을 일으키고 그런 역사입니다.
Багата українська земля була завжди, і люди, перш за все, були завжди те, за що нас хотіли завоювати.
우크라이나는 비옥한 땅을 가지고 있고 좀 풍부한 문화를 가진 나라로서 정말 부러워하는 이들이 많았습니다.
I say you the words of former Prime Minister of Israel, Golda Meir, who was born in Kiev, Ukraine, actually. And you know the situation in Israel, what's the difficulties this country has with the old neighbors. And she said at that time that our people would like to live. Our neighbors would like us to die. There is not much room for compromise. Тому я хочу сказати, що дивно, що ми маємо пояснювати комусь, чому, і виправдовуватись за те, що в нас вже більше, ми не можемо підрахувати скільки, але тільки те, що ми можемо підрахувати, це вже десятки тисяч вбитих людей.
네, 저희가 왜 이제 왜 공격 당해야 되는지 정말 이해가 안 가고요. 정말 평화롭게 살고 싶은 우크라이나인이고요. 아마 공식적 데이터가 아직 밝혀지진 않았지만 아마 10,000명이나 그 이상 지금 사상자가 있다고 생각합니다.
Серед цих вбитих людей українці, росіяни, євреї, грузини, греки. Вже це говорить про те, що ніхто нікого не звільняє. Просто країна-агресор прийшла захопити твою територію під себе, захопити всі ресурси, захопити все, що в нас є.
우크라이나에 소수민족들이 많이 살고 있습니다. 러시아뿐만 아니라 유대인, 조지아, 뭐 그리스 다양한 민족들이 살고 있는데 러시아가 저희를 뭐 구하러 왔다고 생각하는데 정말 누구를 구하러 왔는지 정말 이해가 안 갑니다.
Росіяни змогли захопити лише одне місто, велике, Херсон. І вчора по всьому інтернету гуляли кадри, як вони вивозять з Херсона зерно, комбайни, всю техніку, ну, тобто просто грабують це місто.
네, 지금까지 남부 쪽에 헤르손 큰 도시 이제 점령했는데요. 어제 뉴스 보니까 정말 러시아 군들이 뭐 곡식이나 뭐 곡물, 뭐 콤바인, 뭐 농업기계 그런 것들은 다 이제 가져가고 그런 일들이 벌어지고 있습니다.
Тому я думаю, ми не маємо виправдовуватись. Ви просто говоріть правду.
그래서 여러분 사실대로 그런 이제 우크라이나 관련 정보를 주변 사람들한테 알리십시오. 그게 여러분들의 역할이고 좀 큰 역할을 하겠습니다.
Дякую.
Посол каже, що багато запитань, можна трошки
окей.
коротко відповідати.
I will be shorter. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, thank you, Ambassador, for your amazing speech. I'm also a student from Yonsei University, and I'm studying international law to become a diplomat myself in the future, hopefully. And I wanted to ask you about the roles of the ambassador. And as an ambassador of Ukraine, I predict that you have an important role of presenting to and also persuading the other nations regarding immediate actions and support. But I also expect that there's a limit to encouraging other nations' support, given that some of them have complicated relationships with your opponent country, Russia. And also regarding some people argue against supporting another nation, this case, Ukraine, militarily because of its violent nature. So what do you think is a more prospective approach in actually making other countries to move and take action at this point, other than persuasion? And what will you do if other countries stay reluctant until the war is over, like to make them actually move? Thank you.
Thank you. So I propose to you to look at this situation from the broad range, not like the war, local war between Russia and Ukraine, but for the very great and big pattern on the map of the world. So we understand that previously many countries has its own relation with Russia. We count out that possibly about 10% of the South Korea trade with Russia, I mean, turnover is about 10% possibly. So it's a huge involvement in bilateral trade between you and the Russia. I know the policy, North policy, which was announced by the President Moon previously, which helped you to be connected with the European, the great European continent through the North Korea, through Russia to Europe. It's a huge project, and you look at it as a potentially preferable policy for the country. But you have to understand that the situation changed already very much, and we cannot plan as we do previously, because we already see that the country split half by half. So several countries decided to be closely to Russia, to China. And many countries decided to join the democratic way. I mean, like with the country to stay in along with the with the USA, Great Britain. And you have to re-evaluate all your policy in this direction. And I think the new president administration already think about it, how to reevaluate the policy with Russia or with the Eurasia, I say it's broader. And it's difficult, really difficult now to choose the way. But what I would like to say you, that we always try to calm the lion near us, just to do whatever they want, not actually whatever they want, but to find a way how to cope with them. For you as well, it's a very hard decision. You have the country on the north, which is very aggressive and unpredictable. And you have to understand that as more capable you will be as a country, as more, how to say, independent in your decisions, but definitely you have to have a good alliances with this. So it's a difficult decision right now for the countries. The world is shaking. The economy of the world is shaking. We will see the consequences. We haven't seen the consequences right now. We just see the war is going on, but the all consequences we will see in the near future. The shortages of the food supply, the everything. And definitely who will choose your way first will be in more better situation when the country who will be, trying to balance in between. Actually, the balancing country usually losing the way. This is possibly my point of view.
Hello, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Daniel, and I'm studying business and politics here at SNU. So first of all, my deepest condolences to you and the people of Ukraine who are going through such hard times. And I'm sure the people of Ukraine will remain strong and overcome this anti-humanitarian war. So my question is whether an analogy stands between Ukraine and South Korea. So much like Ukraine, South Korea is in the middle of the free world and authoritarian regimes like China and North Korea. And as tension is climbing, we are feeling the pressure to explicitly choose a side. For example, like joining the Five Eyes. So based on the experience of Ukraine, what would be your advice on South Korea if we were to maintain peace and overcome this era of crisis?
Я вже сказав свою пораду, що країна має подивитись на цю ситуацію трошки не з середини подій, не з розвитку двосторонніх відносин з тою чи іншою країною, а піднятись на ситуацію і трошки подивитись в майбутнє.
전에도 비슷한 질문을 받아서 이미 제가 말씀드렸지만 한국인 입장에서 좀 이렇게 중간에 있는 것보다 좀 더 양국 관계라기보다는 좀 더 크게 좀 권범하게 살펴볼 필요가 있습니다.
Гра позитивна завжди тільки тоді, коли контрпартнери в вашій грі передбачувані. Ви можете зрозуміти, з ким ви граєтесь і на яких умовах.
저희가 게임하다 보면 상대방이 누군지 그리고 어떻게 게임을 펼쳐야 되는지 예상했을 때 그 긍정적인 결과가 나옵니다.
Може, якщо партнери не передбачувані, все ж таки змінити політику і переорієнтуватись більш конкретно на країни, які грають по правилам, такі як Сполучені Штати, Велика Британія.
저희가 파트너를 예상하지 못했을 때, 그리고 게임이 좀 다른 방향으로 틀어졌을 때 저희가 좀 전략을 바꿔야 될 필요가 있고요. 규칙대로 하는 미국 같은 국가와 이제 손을 잡고 또 그 관계 맺는 게 좋습니다.
Я просто скажу вам один невеличкий приклад. Країна, умовна країна, залежна від постачання з іншої країни певної категорії продуктів, нафти або якихось рідкоземельних, якихось руди, наприклад.
예를 들면 석유와 같은 아니면 자원 수입하는 좀 그런 의존하는 국가가 있다고 생각해 보세요. 예를 들면
Коли ви граєте по правилам, то ви можете вибудовувати гру. Я залежен тут, ми можемо заплатити якусь більшу ціну, але якщо ти говориш з країною-диктатором, то він будь-який момент може шантажувати цією залежністю тебе.
저희가 규칙대로 게임을 펼쳐지면 어려운 상황이 있더라도 좀 대가를 올려서 물품을 살 수 있는데 독재자하고 게임을 할 때 저희가 통제를 받고 있고 그런 좀 그런 상황이 벌어집니다.
Він скаже, я припиню поставки, або ти маєш платити за це в рублях, або я буду постачати тобі, а ти роби те-то, те-то і те-то. це неприйнятно.
독재자 이제 말한 대로 저희가 게임을 바꿔야 되고요. 예를 들면 독재자가 석유 공급 중단하겠다 아니면 이제부터 달러 아닌 루블로 거래하겠다 했을 때 저희가 그 게임을 따라할 수밖에 없습니다.
І це безкінечна гра. Ти завжди залежиш від країни, яка більше тебе, або країна, яка непередбачувана.
그런 예상치 못한 그런 이제 사정이 생기고요. 그 나라가 권력 있고 그 나라 규칙대로 게임을 해야 됩니다.
Тому, можливо, це буде для багатьох шанс переосмислити свою політику, в тому числі економічно.
이 상황에서 저희가 경제적인 상황 좀 재평가하고 기회로 또 삼았으면 좋겠습니다.
Ми були залежні від Росії до 2014 року. Це був наш головний торгівельний партнер.
여러분은 아시다시피 러시아가 저희 나라 제일 큰 무역 거래 파트너입니다. 2014년까지.
Але коли вони почали нас шантажувати, ми зрозуміли, що краще переорієнтуватись на другі країни. Світ великий, чим бути безкінечно шантажований країною, яка все більше і більше тебе напрягає.
그리고 그 당시에 저희가 그 사실을 깨달았을 때 저희는 그러면 이제부터 저희 러시아 100% 의존하기보다는 저희 인근 국가와 거래하기 시작했습니다.
Зараз ми відкрили для себе Африку, ми відкриваємо Азію, Європу. І тут ми бачимо надійних партнерів.
저희가 유럽 이외에도 이제부터 아프리카, 아시아 국가들하고 이제 거래 시작했고 여기서 좀 더 든든한 그리고 좀 믿을 만한 무역 파트너 되었습니다.
Ми дуже сподіваємось на розширення і розвиток торгівельних відносин саме з Південною Кореєю.
특히 이제부터 한국하고 좀 더 이익이 되는 그런 협력 관계를 무역 협력 관계를 확대됐으면 바람입니다.
Я поділюсь з вами ідеєю президента України, яку ми зараз намагаємось донести до уряду Кореї.
최근에 저희 젤렌스키 대통령 아이디어를 내주셨는데 저희가 이제 정부에다가 이 메시지를 전달하고자 노력 중에 있습니다.
Ми пропонуємо, щоб Корея взяла під патронат або одне місто, або регіон, область, або галузь якусь української економіки і оголосила про це офіційно, і зробила з цього дуже класний проєкт.
어떤 거냐면 아주 대규모 프로젝트가 될 겁니다. 만약에 한국이 희망만 한다면 우크라이나에서 어떤 특정한 지역 또는 특정한 부문 맡아서 좀 재건할 수 있게 좀 앞으로 뭐 투자도 하고 그런 도움을 좀 받았으면 하는데 지금 정부에 저희가 계속 전달드리고자 합니다.
Наприклад, відновити в невеликому місті, там як Чернігів, наприклад, відновити транспорт завдяки корейським інвестиціям і корпораціям, телекомунікації, житлові будинки. І це буде для Кореї дійсно великий і дуже ефективний проєкт. Про це будуть говорити в світі.
예를 들면 치르니기프라는 도시가 있는데 그쪽에서 이제 뭐 교통시설 또는 통신 또는 주택 건설 부문에서 한국이 이제 가지고 있는 경험대로 재건에 많은 노력을 기울이시면 정말 효과적인 큰 프로젝트가 될 거고요. 그 아주 한국 이미지도 아마 도움이 될 겁니다.
Thank you.
I would like to take one question submitted online by Professor Dongjun Cho. Proper name is very important. I have some reservations on several English names of the current armed conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine war, Russia-Ukraine war, Russia-Ukraine war. What do you propose as a name of the armed conflict?
The name of
this war.
this is a Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Russian invasion of Ukraine. Yes, so we'll go back to the audience. Let's take one.
Or Russian war against Ukraine. That's definitely not a military operation, which was announced. It's really, they announced.
Hello, I'm Young-Sun Min, a freshman of Department of Political Science and International Relations here in SMU. And I'm very honored to be in this seminar. And I would like to show my deep condolence to the Ukrainians as well as your meaningful speech today. Considering that the circumstance of the status quo is a multi-local phenomenon with sovereignty of each nation rather than simply new Cold War, as Ukraine's attempt to join NATO and EU was based on not only the problem of national security or economy, but also the matter of active subjectivity and agency of the Ukrainians and identity politics. What is the Ukrainian government's unchanging and unified principle when it comes to international relations? And what would be the best case scenario of cessation of this war for Ukraine, considering the balance among the world powers and political identity of Ukraine? Thank you.
Якщо говорити про найбільш прийнятний сценарій, то наразі ми говоримо про те, що if we are talking about the most better scenario for ending this war, we are now talking about the withdrawal of. So when we are talking about the withdrawal of the Russian troops to the level they start from the 23rd. They was on the 21st of February. So this is the point when we can start to negotiate with them. Definitely, we will not trade by our territories. Definitely, we will not trade our independence. And we can negotiate the neutral status. We can negotiate the neutral status of Ukraine, but we have to have the ironclad guarantees from the main powers, world powers like G5, which promised us not like in the memorandum. Because even in this memorandum, it was also some misunderstandings, which was translated from is mistranslated from the English, like assurances in English. And it was translated to Ukrainian and Russian like guarantees. So it's kind of, at that time it wasn't, and possibly thereafter it was the problem. So we definitely can talk, but we have to be sure that we will not be the next country of invasion after signing this memorandum, neutral country of invasion.
Your Excellency, my name is Ju-Sung Kim, majoring in political sciences, Seoul National University. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for your sincere speech, trying to protect freedom and democracy in Ukraine. Such a touching speech moved my mind as a citizen in a country with history of a war just like Ukraine. I'd like to ask you about how the security terrain of Europe would be changed since Ukraine-Russian war. How the attempt of NATO accession of Finland and Sweden, and the arms buildup of Eastern European countries, and how the nuclear threat would be proceeded in the near future. Again, I'd like to express deep condolences and cheer for courageous Ukraine government and citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your kind and warm words. I haven't get really the question.
How this war, do you think will change the security
The international
contour
security
of
pattern.
the Europe, and also you could comment on this Sweden and Finland, joining of NATO.
If you will see the law of the war, if you can consider in the law of the war never stopped just by one country invading the other without reason. So I think maybe the reason of the Putin is much broader than just invading the Ukraine. If we theoretically thinking that he would like to reestablish the Soviet Union, so we can see that many other countries is under this threat in this situation. And we can see the most dangerous situation now with the countries which is not part of the international security pattern. So it's a Georgia. Georgia is not the member of the state of the NATO. It's Moldova. It's also not the member of the NATO organization. Countries which is bordering from the Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. This is also country which is hugely important for the Russia by the resources side because of the oil and other resources. And this country also always blamed by the Putin like the country without the history. So many times said the Kazakhstan, it was artificial country as the many others. So we can understand that the threat of the war definitely is under these countries, which is not members. And the situation with the neutral country in the Europe, like Sweden, Finland. Finland already have the history with Russia in 1938 when they was invaded by the Russian forces and win at that time. And definitely they are hardly thinking that the neutral status now, it's not the shield for them. Because, when the countries from one bloc or the other, they are in clash, they try to avoid the neutral countries, not to invade them, but not now. So we understand that whole the European pattern will be changed. That's why they're hardly thinking about the joining the NATO right now. And I think this is the wise decision of them. Possible.
Hello, good afternoon. I am a student from Seoul National University, graduate student from Ukraine. So first of all, thank you for your speech.
Are you from Ukraine?
Yes, I'll speak in Ukrainian later.
Okay.
Thank you for your speech. And as Ukrainian, I know everything you're talking about here from news since I'm following them, but also as Ukrainian, I'd like to know if are there any discussions of Korea's further help to Ukraine, not like city reconstruction, like London proposed.
Yeah.
To
reconstruct the Kiev
But
district.
is there any help from Korea, like humanitarian help, or are they going to help in any other way? And also the second question is, with all the statements made by Lukashenko, and we usually forget about him and Belarus, but I am curious if we have to be afraid about further and more active participation of Belarus in this war. Так, доброго дня, пане посол.
Добрий день.
Так, мене звуть Яна, я з України, з міста Дніпро.
Земляки.
Я сподіваюся, що ваші близькі, що вони в порядку зараз. Та моє питання це, чи обговорюється якось подальша участь Кореї, подальша допомога Кореї?
Я зрозумів, ви ж англійською.
Так.
About the participation of the South Korea in the humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. So first of all, we are very much thankful to Korea government and especially to the Korea people for the humanitarian support. We as an embassy, we receive a lot of donations, goods, to be sent to Ukraine as a humanitarian assistance from the peoples of Korea. As to the government, we appreciate the decision of the government to issue the humanitarian aid. First, they decided to issue the 10 million US, and it's already, we send a lot of this from this 10 millions we already said in the medical supply, in the protective gear, and the Korean government also decided to issue additional 30 million United States dollars for the humanitarian aid to Ukraine, and we appreciate it very much. We are thankful for this decision to the Korean government. And several days ago, actually one week ago, I was presenting my credentials to the President Moon, and I personally thank him for this decision, because it's very important for us. We are counting on Korea, on the South Korea. We considering the South Korea as one of the main partners in Asia, and we appreciate the help, and we ask him for the further assistance and further participation in this from your part, from your country parts. As to the decision by the government of Korea about the patronage over the one of Ukrainian cities, it's a very new idea. It was delivered to us by the presidential administration just 1 week ago. I already announced it to the President Moon when I was honored to talk to him during the credentials ceremony. And he positively reacted, but definitely I think that it's the task for the new government. And we had the several meetings already. Actually, we try to work not only with the political power which supported the new government. We are trying to work with we are trying to receive the bipartisan support from Korea Parliament. We met with the next, I hope, next Speaker of the National Assembly last week, and he assured us that the Democratic Party will be supporting Ukraine. And 2 days ago, we met with the Vice Speaker from the People's Party and receiving support from them as well. And now we are working hard with the new coming government. We already knew the nominees from this government. I met with the candidate at that time. And we expect that the new policy of the new Korean government will be more proactive to Ukraine, more proactive, because it's not just a local situation, and the Korean decision makers understand what all the difficulties which this war of Russia against Ukraine brings to the international order, to the international daily life, to the international business, to the financial system. And I think the new government, we hope and we ask, new government will be more proactive to Ukraine.
Hi, I'm Myung-hyun Jung, and I major in Western History and Political Science in Seoul National University. And first of all, thank you for your inspiring speech, and I really sympathize with the situation in Ukraine. And I sincerely hope that that war would end as quickly as possible. Actually, I have been concerned about the inner conflict in Ukraine, especially in Donbas region. You mentioned that there are about 17% of Russians in Ukraine, and most of them live in Donbas region. And I heard that these Russians want of Donbas being separated and annexed to Russia, and I think Putin wants it. So it can be quite a sensitive question, but if Moscow keeps suggesting separation and neutralization of Donbas as a bargaining card for peace treaty, is there any possibility of Ukraine government accepting that offer for stopping war? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, it's not inner conflict. I will try to explain you the situation. When the Euromaidan happened in Ukraine in 2014, the Russia, understanding the whole situation, was using this situation for, first of all, invasion of Crimea, because there was the military base in Crimea, and they understand that in the 2017 we signed the law that this base should be moved out of Crimea. So it's unacceptable. It was unacceptable for the Russian government, and they at that time they was trying military invade Ukraine, and Ukraine was invaded by the unidentified Russian troops without any labels on the uniform, and with the understanding that Crimea is the republic, they have the status of the autonomous republic. So they announced in Ukraine there was the Crimea Autonomous Republic of Ukraine. They decided to implicit the referendum there. And you just can imagine what the referendum is when you are staying on under the barrel of the guns and voting. So definitely the referendum was for independence of Crimea, but they wasn't understand at that time what to do with the Donetsk and Lugansk Republic, because it's the regions, it's not autonomous republic. It's two regions of Ukraine. So they just using the Ukrainian separatist forces, arm them from Russia, sending them a lot of the heavy machine guns, artillery. They occupied the part of this republic and make so-called Donetsk and Lugansk republics. But as to the, and this is really the problem for us because the Russians 100% control the government of these republics. The all people there is under the strict Russian force. So for us, and it's a really unacceptable if you are talking about the possibility of ending the wars just to afford this republic to be their own, to go their own, it's unacceptable for us. I told that we will not trade by the territories of Ukraine. We will not trade by the territories. Yeah.
We'll take 2 questions and you will answer.
Thank you.
네, 먼저 질문하겠습니다. 예, 우선 이렇게 귀중한 시간을 내주신 대사님께 감사드리고, 그리고 우크라이나를 여행으로 그리고 학회로 그리고 워크숍차 여러 번 방문해 봤던 사람으로서 지금 우크라이나에서 벌어지고 있는 일들에 대해 굉장히 안타까운 마음을 금할 수 없고 또 전쟁에서 희생되시고 지금 고생하고 계신 여러분들에 대한 심심한 애도와 지지와 응원을 보냅니다. 예, 저는 서울대학교 정치외교학부 외교학전공 박사과정에 있는 이준석이라고 합니다. 제 질문은 이제 일단 한국어로 질문을 하고 그 다음에 우크라이나로 간단하게 설명을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 제 질문은 지금 정전협정 혹은 평화협정에서 논의되고 있는 우크라이나에 대한 집단 안전보장에 대한 질문입니다. 제가 알기로 3월부터 지금 진행되고 있는 우크라이나와 러시아 간 정전협정 혹은 평화협정에서 지금 우크라이나의 안전보장 방식에 대해서 이를 이제 유엔 상임이사국과 그다음에 여러 다른 나라들이 참가하는 형식의 집단 안전보장의 형식으로 이루어져야 한다는 우크라이나 측과 그다음에 어떤 식으로든 안전보장이 이루어지긴 해야 하지만 집단 안전보장의 형태로는 아직 좀 어렵다라고 생각하는 서방 국가들 간의 이견이 있는 것으로 알고 있는데 지금 이런 국면에서 우크라이나 정부가 어떠한 방법으로 그렇다면은 집단 안전보장의 형식에 대해서 서방 국가들을 설득할 수 있을 것인지에 대해서 묻고 싶습니다. 간단하게 우크라이나로 말씀드리자면은 різні голоси про гарантію колективної безпеки України. Як ваша держава планує переконувати ті країни про необхідності колективної безпеки України, які стратегії у вашій державі? Дуже дякую.
Дякую. Дуже дякую. Тут багато тих, хто говорить українською мовою. Дуже приємно. Можете?
네, 질문 특히 우크라이나어로 해주셔서 감사드립니다.
Ні, що він...
Росія і Україна зараз ведуть переговори, і Захід також прилучається до цього процесу. Як можна переконати західні країни щодо забезпеки гарантій безпеки?
Ну, дивіться, ситуація з переконанням дуже проста.
네, 이제 질문 대답하겠습니다. 서방 국가들을 어떻게 설득할 수 있느냐, 이제 그 안전 관한 질문하셨는데요. 대답은 쉽습니다. 간단합니다.
Ми вже бачимо, що Путін програв цю війну.
푸틴이 이미 이 전쟁을 이미 이기지 못한다고 생각합니다.
Його намагання захопити Україну за 2, 3, 4 дні не сталося.
여러분 아시다시피 초기에 2, 3일 안에 키예프를 점령하려고 그렇게 계획했었는데 이 계획이 실패한 걸로 알고 있습니다.
Він не захопив жодного великого міста, окрім Херсона.
헤르손 제외해서 나머지 도시를 어쨌든 지금 우크라이나 통제하에 되어 있고요.
Українці вже не відступлять. Ми будемо захищати і визволяти нашу землю далі.
우크라이나인들이 끝까지 싸울 것이고 저희 시민들을 끝까지 싸울 것으로 저희 확신합니다.
Ми бачимо, що не такий страшний вовк, як його малюють. У нас є таке прислів'я.
그 말씀하신 것처럼 이제 러시아가 이제 늑대랑 비할 수 있는데 처음에 저희가 생각했던 것처럼 그렇게 무섭지 않습니다.
Тому тут вже мова йде лише про те, як і з чим нам його перемагати, з якою зброєю.
하지만 어떤 무기를 가지고 저희가 이길 수 있느냐 관건입니다.
І це розуміє Європа, що вона зобов'язана для безпеки в себе і для того, щоб війна не переросла в світову, забезпечити нас максимально технічно і військово.
다행스럽게도 서방 국가들은 이 부분을 잘 이해하고 있습니다. 이 전쟁이 서방 쪽으로 이제 확대되지 않도록 무기를 써야 되고요. 기술적으로 그리고 군사적으로 지원을 해야 저희가 우승할 수 있습니다.
Якщо раніше це рішення не було остаточно прийнято, то вже зараз всі міжнародні партнери розуміють, що Україні треба допомогти військово.
예전에는 그런 부분을 이해 못하고 좀 망설이는 국가들도 있습니다. 하지만 지금부터 꼭 이제 군사적인 지원에 많은 국가들이 참여를 했습니다.
Декілька днів тому на базі Рамштайн в Німеччині було засідання більше 40 країн-партнерів саме по питанню постачання зброї в Україну.
며칠 전에 독일 람슈타인 기재에서 40여 개국 참여를 해서 우크라이나 군사적으로 어떻게 지원할지 그런 회담이 있었습니다.
Це рішення прийнято і ухвалений вже алгоритм, як це буде робитись.
그런 이제 최종적인 결정이 났고 그런 알고리즘이 이제 나왔습니다.
Тому ми не можемо говорити зараз з позиції слабкості, а ми говоримо з позиції сили. Ми перемагаємо. Нам для цього потрібно лише озброєння.
저희가 우크라이나가 이제부터 약자가 아닙니다. 저희가 강자로 바라보고 있고요. 저희가 무기가 있으면 이제 이길 수 있다는 것이 확신합니다.
Але найбільш жахлива і страшна річ, яка відбувається зараз, що російські військові розуміють цю ситуацію, що вони не переможуть нас конвенційною зброєю, ну, звичайною зброєю, conventional weapons.
컨벤셔널 무기라고 해서 러시아 군들이도 이제 이 무기로 이길 수 없다는 거는 잘 알고 있습니다.
Тому зараз вже йдуть погрози з боку російських політиків, телеканалів, погрози застосування неконвенційної зброї, а саме ядерної, біологічної та хімічної.
그래서 이제 정치인계에서 그리고 러시아 언론사 측에서 이제 협박하기 시작했습니다. 컨벤셔널 무기 말고 이제 핵무기 또는 바이올로지컬 무기 또는 화학 무기를 이제 사용하겠다 그렇게 계속 협박하고 있습니다.
Це дуже небезпечна ситуація.
아주 위험한 상황이죠.
Це ситуація, яка може спровокувати дійсно дуже серйозний світовий конфлікт.
그리고 아주 세계적인 큰 위기로 돌이킬 수 있습니다.
Вчора головний пропагандист Росії погрожував використати ядерний підводний безпілотний апарат для того, щоб підірвати ядерний боєзаряд поблизу Великобританії, щоб спровокувати цунамі, яке знесе Великобританію з лиця землі.
어제도 TV에 보니까 러시아 이제 제일 선동을 많이 일으키는 언론 그 뭐 기자가 있는데 이제 그 사람이 앞으로 이제 핵무기 계속 그 얘기를 하고 있고 뭐 영국 쪽으로 이제 뭐 발사 그런 좀 위험한 발언을 하고 있습니다. 그게 뭐 쓰나미로 이제 보일 수도 있지만 아주 그 얘기 좀 무섭습니다. 말만 들어도.
Тому я не скажу вам остаточний сценарій і остаточний алгоритм, як вирішити це питання, як закінчити війну. Я думаю, що цього не знає, мабуть, ніхто зараз.
우선은 전쟁 빨리 하루 빨리 끝나는 게 저희 바람인데 어떻게 효과적으로 어떤 시나리오를 써야 이게 전식이 될지 저희도 사실은 잘 모릅니다.
Все, що я знаю, що всі країни прогресивні, демократичні, і серед яких є безперечно Корея, повинні об'єднатися для допомоги сьогодні нашій країні, яка сама одноосібно бореться зараз за свою незалежність.
분명한 것은 저희 자유민주주의를 싸우는 전쟁이기 때문에 국제사회의 민주주의, 한국 비롯하여 모든 국가들은 노력을 기울여야 합니다. 합쳐야 됩니다.
Да, світ розділився на чорне і біле. Вже дуже важко себе буде знайти десь в сірому.
안타까운 것은 이 전쟁으로 인해서 모든 이제 세계가 흑색으로 분리가 되었고 자기 자신이 자기 국가가 어디 있는지 구분하기도 어렵습니다.
Hello, I am Yoon Lee, a freshman of the Department of Political Science and International Relations in SNU. First of all, thank you so much for your speech. I could understand how the people of Ukraine think of the war and the real truth of the war. I really hope the situation in Ukraine will get better soon. Of course, I completely agree with your idea that we can't say that Ukraine's actions provoked the war. Nevertheless, I want to ask you if you think there were any diplomatic factors or situations before the war that Ukraine or maybe other countries of the world could have prevented the war. Thank you.
You mean from the Ukrainian side, a situation which occurred to prevent the war? I tell you my story. I was involved in this subject, say, from the 2014, when I was the ambassador at large in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, working in the Russia department. And at the time when the Russia occupied the Donetsk and Lugansk region and Crimea, I was the member of the Minsk negotiation team at that time. And every Tuesday and Wednesday we was spending in Minsk in the negotiation it was trilateral negotiations, Ukrainian side, Russia side, and joining the representatives of so-called Donetsk and Lugansk republics and the OSCE representatives. And during, I spent there 2 years until the 2016 when I was sent to China as the Consul General. And during all this period, believe me, every week we was trying to prevent more aggression from Russia, just discussing the political issues, humanitarian issues, military issues. and the economic issues, how to help the Ukrainians live in these territories occupied by Russia. And it was really tough and difficult job when you have this some time frames, because this group was, according to the Minsk memorandum, this group was available only until the end of the 2015, and then until the end of 1 year more. So, and when you are negotiating and have not big result, but just the daily result to help the people to rebuild the electrical grids, to help the people to receive the pensions on this territory, just to cease the fire when they started the shelling, we making the agreement to cease the fire. And this is the daily job which was done by Ukrainian side, just to prevent the more military escalation at that time. Is if I correctly understand your question.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for speaking with us today. Your speech and answers to questions today will certainly have a huge impact
Thank you very much.
on the communities of SNU and Korea. 박수로서 감사의 뜻을.
Actually, I would like to tell you that I'm happy being here. See so beautiful eyes, so so young, interested generation, which is very much interested in understanding what's going on in the conflict. It's not conflict, in what's going on during the war and Russian aggression against Ukraine. And I would like to tell you that I will be happy to be here whenever you afford me to be here, just to explain you from inside, from the ground, from the field, what is going on and how the situation is developed. And thank you very much. And we in Ukraine always ending the speech with the Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine. Thank you.